There exists a threat, from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Hey, what's happening, guys? Welcome to episode 6 of the Western Huntsman Podcast. Glad you guys have tuned it in. And today, so I got kind of a funny story. I had this sweet interview lined up with a guy that is kind of a local legend in the area that I live. So, but what happened was when I met him at his place of business, I don't want to give away too many details because we rescheduled this bad boy. We met at his place of business, and we got kind of bullshitting about all the. He's got all this cool decor in there, right? You know, it's real outdoors focused and whatnot. So we get talking and yakking, and next thing we know, we're down to like he's got a half an hour or something before he has to go pick up his daughter from school. So we started recording, got some really good content, and then we had to cut it short, and it was a super abrupt stop. So. What we did is I said, you know, he's got so much good stuff to talk about, and I'd love to get more out of him. So we rescheduled it for next week. And so that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to go meet back with him at his place, and we're going to sit down and record a full episode so that you guys, I want you guys to hear from this guy. He's got some great stories and some freaking awesome wild game recipes we're going to talk about when I meet with him next week. So it's going to be a pretty sweet episode. So in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk about some stories, tell some stories, and these aren't going to be like some crazy successful hunting stories or anything like that I've got. What I wanted to do is kind of focus on like stories with some kind of lesson in them for whether you're a young hunter or a adult onset hunter or whatever. Stories that kind of have an interesting twist that I just want to tell you guys. They're from hunts that I've done all over the country, and give you guys a little bit. I think it'll help too because I don't really talk about. Usually I have these awesome guests on the show, and I'm getting some kind of messages here and there that the audience doesn't know much about me. And so I'm going to talk about, share some of these stories that help you guys get to know me a little bit better. Hopefully you'll like that. If not, no big deal. And then we'll kick back off with the regular episodes next week. I've got some great dudes coming on. Super excited about it. I can't wait to announce them. I'm trying to keep them a secret. So that's where we're at with that. Before I get into those stories, I want to make an announcement on something new I'm going to do. Let's see here. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a video about it so you guys could check out this cool t-shirt that my buddies over at Dipstick12, let's see, let me make sure I'm getting the name of this place right. Dip123.com apparel. They're out of South Carolina, actually. Anyway, my buddy Danny over there sent me a free t-shirt with the Western Huntsman Podcast on it. It's pretty badass, and I'm wearing it right now. So I'm going to make a video after I record this podcast to put it on my page. And what we're going to do is you guys, most of you have listened to the episode, I believe it was episode 4 with Justin Webb, Foundation for Wildlife Management. And what we're going to do is I want you guys to write into me and give me some cool ideas for a t-shirt regarding wolf management, whether it's trapping or hunting or nuclear weapons, whatever. And so write into me at jim@thewesternhuntsman.com, and what it is I'm going to take everybody's ideas, and we're going to make a t-shirt out of I don't know, I might select one, and I might select up to 3 and make like 3 different variations of t-shirts with creative sayings that the audience has come up with to put on these t-shirts. And we got to get creative with it too. Like don't send me SSS or something like that. Get creative with them. Something along the lines of, helping save our wildlife one wolf at a time kind of thing. Come up with a cool saying and email them in. Obviously, the email, I'm going to put that in the show notes so you guys can check that out so you don't have to memorize it. But it's pretty simple. Jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. Just remember, I'm Jim Huntsman, and I live in the West and I hunt the West. So the Jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. So I'm going to make an announcement video on that, so it's got a little bit more clarity. But send in an idea, cool T-shirt saying regarding managing wolves, and then what I will do is when I'm going to pick one or possibly up to three, and whoever gets selected, I'm gonna send you guys a free T-shirt, so you'll have that free T-shirt, and it'll have the Western Huntsman logo on it too, so that'll be pretty cool. The Western Huntsman logo and whatever wolf management saying you guys come up with creativity-wise, send it on over, man. It's gonna be cool. And then, and speaking of the Foundation for Wildlife Management, $35 gets you a membership. That is the one foundation that is actively doing something about our wolf management. And if you hunt in the state of Idaho and enjoy the outdoors in the state of Idaho, you should be a member of the Foundation for Wildlife Management. Remember, when you're signing up to the Foundation for Wildlife Management, if you put in that you heard of the foundation from the Western Huntsman podcast, you're going to be entered in to win a Phelps Bugle tube and a Maverick reed. That reed is kind of the signature reed of Dirk Durham from episode 1. I called in lots of bulls on that thing last season, so it's well worth it. So get in there, entered into that competition, so you guys can check it out. Foundation for Wildlife Management. Go there. It's f4wm.org and type in the Western Huntsman podcast. When you sign up, $35 membership goes a long way. What they do is they help connect people that want wolves managed with people that have the ways and means to get the job done. So let's do this, guys. Get on over there and sign up. So other than that, let's get into some stories and talk about hunting, because that's what we do, right? So brace yourself for some excellent hunting experiences. Let's get into it.
The following segment is a true story. Even the most unbelievable depictions are actual accounts of events that happened.
Yeah, that's right, bitch.
Did you guys like that? I just honestly, I just like playing with the sound effects on this thing. So just wait till I get the money to get a real sound engineering piece of software installed on this thing. It's going to be badass. Anyways, all right, I'm going to kick us off with a story. I'm from Utah. I was hunting mule deer in Utah. I'm 17 years old. And I had kind of central Utah, there is this mountain range called the Manti La Sal's. It's got some high elevation and just monster mule deers, or mule deer bucks. So I'm kind of hunting the foothills, right? Because my birthday is in November. And so this was like my first year that I had my own rig and was allowed to, just kind of go off on my own and drive on my own without, my dad or somebody dropping me off, just taking off on my own and going deer hunting. And so this was kind of I think it was like the last day or the second to last day. What I did is I was hunting the foothills, so the elevation gain wasn't that great, but I knew there was this huge herd of mule deer, and I'm young. I didn't understand a lot of mule deer hunting at that point, and wasn't quite. I was just happy with whatever buck I could find, right? And I'm still like that. I'm not like some. I don't always go after crazy huge monsters that I've been tracking and whatnot. So anyway, I parked my truck. I'm driving this 1977 Chevy long bed Silverado, 3/4 ton pickup truck. It had one of those full-time four-wheel drive 400 motors in it, and it just sucked more gas than you can imagine. So that was another reason I'm hunting the foothills. I didn't have the money to drive all the way to the top of the mountain and go from there. So parked my truck. I'm using a 30-06, all decked out in my orange, which was required at the time. And I knew if I had kind of, from the dirt road, if I headed due north through a couple of drainages, there was like this meadow that opened up in the third drainage, right? And there was always deer in there. And lots of sign, lots of activity. I knew what they did is the deer would go essentially hang out in that area all day long, and then they would head down at night to feed in the alfalfa fields that were like a couple miles down off the mountain there. So I made my way to this meadow, and sure enough, there's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 deer in there, most of them does. But there was a pretty nice 3-point buck. Nice mule deer. So he's just kind of hanging out. It's probably 150 yards. He's just kind of hanging out in this meadow, casually feeding. Sometimes he'd kind of look in my direction. I'm in the tree line and kind of setting up on him, right? And there's some other does that are meandering, so I had to be real careful. I didn't want to get spotted or busted by any of the does. So it was kind of odd because what the meadow had this like grassy brush in it, and it was just about what I would call waist high to a deer. You couldn't really see legs. You just saw body and head, and the deer's hanging out. It seemed like an easy shot. So I I raised my rifle and I stabilized it on a tree branch. I'm in some quaking aspen trees. That just a beautiful area, really. And I stabilized my rifle and I put that cross right where it needs to be, right? Pull the trigger, bang. I see the body of this deer drop, and then the buck looks in my direction and then turns around and runs the other way. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? Because I saw a deer drop, but the buck ran away. So I'm highly confused, right? I just kind of walk out into this meadow and going over to where that buck was standing. And once I get up to it, right there on the ground, there's this dead doe. Just totally blew the back end of her off, this 30-06. I'm not totally sure exactly how this happened, but I could tell you that what I know happened is the buck is standing there with his head up facing kind of west, right? The doe was kind of directly in front of him, not more than 10 feet, with her head facing east. So they were kind of lined up perfectly from my line of vision and my line of sight. The doe, she had her head down. She was kind of feeding, so I didn't see I didn't see a doe standing there, right? I just saw this big-bodied buck with 3-point antler rack on his head, and the doe, I couldn't see her. It was just the way they were lined up. So in this particular case, you cannot, in the state of Utah, hunt. You can't shoot does. You can't shoot not whitetail, muley does. I kind of panicked. I'm 17 years old. I don't know what to do. So I kind of make my way back to my truck. I'm pretty upset about it. I actually gutted the deer out, and it was a mess of a gut job too. I didn't have a lot of experience, right? And so I'm making my way back to the truck and finally get to the truck, and I start driving down the mountain because I was gonna go into town and call the Fish and Game and just let them know, hey, here's what happened. Well, I get almost just about to the hardball, and there is a game warden that is kind of slowly driving up. So I kind of flag him down, and I'm like, hey, man, so here's what happened. There's this buck standing there. A doe was standing in front of it. I couldn't quite tell, and I whacked her. She's down. She's dead. And I'm just trying to do the right thing and fess up to my mistake here. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do about this? And he's like, well, can you take me to the deer? And I'm like, yeah. And then I told him, it's about 1.5 miles through a couple of drainages up and down, but I'm happy to take you there. And so I did, and we hiked back over to the deer, and he basically asked me to, essentially punch my tag, but, he's going to take the deer. And so we both drag it back, and he throws it in his truck, and he didn't give me a ticket. This was back in the day when, I don't know, there was like this just a different culturally, this game warden versus hunter thing that's kind of taken place lately, where they become like adversaries. kind of on the same page back then. He understood, I was honest, I was young, I didn't know what I was doing, and he understood kind of the situation, and he believed me. He didn't think I was lying because, I wasn't. That's exactly what happened. But he did take the deer, and he did have me punch my tag so I couldn't go out and, kill another deer, and which was no big deal. I think there was only a day or two left in the season anyway. And so here's a takeaway for you guys if you're like new to hunting or young and super enthusiastic like I was back then. Mistakes do happen in the field. They happen periodically. I was pretty bummed about it. I was, because especially when you're 17, 18 years old, I was all pumped. I'd found this buck. I was just getting good at deer hunting at this point. I'd been for years and years, and I was just getting to the point where I was starting to get super good at locating deer and finding deer and knowing where, what their habits are and how to find them in their habitat. But I made a mistake and freaking blew that doe away, totally by accident, and that was the result. So, by doing the right thing, I contacted the game warden. He understood and was on my side with it, and kind of protected me. He didn't even give me a hard time really about it. He just I think one of the things he said was, mistakes happen, kid. Let's make sure you don't do this again. And I appreciate you flagging me down because where I shot that deer in that meadow, I could have drug that thing off in the trees and nobody would have ever been the wiser. But I just felt that was a wrong call, and I wanted to make sure that somebody knew about it. So that's kind of the story and the lesson on that one. Mule deer hunting in Utah, accidentally shot a doe standing right in front of a buck that I had total buck fever over. Was super excited to shoot, and it kind of a bummer, disappointing way to end a season. But there's when that does happen, always remember there's lots of seasons coming up, guys. That's it on that one. All right, now we're going to go from hunting mule deer in Utah to all the way over into the Southwest into North Carolina. I'm 20 years old, I think. I don't know. It's 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. I think it was 2000. Yeah, it was 2000. And we survived that whole Y2K event, right? And I was in the Marines. I'm just a young Marine at this point. I'm going to tell, let's see, there we go. I'm going to tell you a super personal story about this because it really ties into this whitetail. All right. First of all, if you jump on my website, thewesternhuntsman.com, and you click on the articles tab, if you scroll down, there's an article called Western Perspectives on Public Land. And what I did in that article is I kind of described the differences between what we in the West as Western hunters enjoy in terms of public land between BLM and Forest Service and all the other public land assets that we have out here. Going to North Carolina was a freaking shock to the system. The limited amounts of public land and access and all that kind of stuff is mind-boggling. And so I kind of break that down in that article about, the title says it all, Western Perspectives on Public Land. And it's actually one of my favorite articles I wrote, and I kind of talk about this next story in it, but I'm going to go into more detail. So I'm a young Marine. I'm an infantry Marine, and infantry Marines do a lot of training and a lot of deployments. So it's super rare that we're actually stateside or not busy during the hunting season months in North Carolina. And it was crazy because I remember going in and I'm buying this tag, and they let you, when you're in the military, you can buy a resident tag. You don't have to buy a non-resident or anything. So I go in and I'm looking at the regs, and it's you can shoot up to 6 deer, which was crazy to me. That was not the case out where I was from, hunting in Utah and Idaho and all these places that you can only shoot 1 deer. Well, so I get out there and I'm all excited, right? Yeah, I'm going to shoot 6 deer, and that the first time I was able to go chase whitetail I'd never chased whitetail before, hunted whitetail before, and I get out there and I can't find anywhere to hunt. This is long before Onyx maps and base maps and all these mapping systems that you can just download on your phone. I mean, we didn't have smartphones. Hell, I didn't even have a cell phone back then. They were around, but I didn't have one. Anyway, so I buy this North Carolina map, those big atlas maps that break down each county in the state and all this, and I actually found some public land, and it wasn't very big. It's called the Croatan National Forest, and in comparison to, like, say, the Coeur d'Alene National Forest, which I live right on the edge of in northern Idaho, it is like just freaking, I don't even know how to compare it. I just don't even know how to compare it. I can tell you this: when you enter the forest on the south side and come out on the north side and hit the hardball again, it's like less than 30 minutes to get through this national forest. Compared to the Coeur d'Alene National Forest right here at my place, you enter today, you're going to come out in Montana sometime around 3 o'clock in the morning if you left at like 6 a.m., right? It's a long freaking drive. It's a lot of backcountry, a lot of dirt roads that just seem endless. So it was just a shock to the system to get out there. And 2000 rolls around, and if you've never been in, had the pleasure of being in the Marine Corps, the Marines like to run, and this is where the story gets a little bit personal. And I'm going to tell you this because it really ties into to makes this story a lot better. So Marines like to run, and it's part of the physical fitness testing that they do. There's usually 4 or 5 times a week. There's like a platoon or company run, and that's just what we do. We run a lot. The Marines work out a lot, and so one of the things that can happen when you run, if your balls aren't supported with the right kind of underwear, there's this thing called testicular torsion. And I'm not embarrassed about telling you guys about this shit. And testicular torsion is what happens is one of your balls essentially twists up inside because they've been bouncing around too much, right? You've been running, and it doesn't happen to everybody, it's just certain people. And of course it happens to me, right? So I get this thing called testicular torsion. We're on this run, and all of a sudden I get this ungodly pain down there, and essentially I fall. And they had to take me back to the kind of the hospital thing or whatever, and it was determined I had testicular torsion, and it fucking hurts, man. It's not like a pain that I can describe in any other way. It just fucking hurts. So this is like August. Deer season opened, I don't know, the first week in October or something like that. They scheduled me for this surgery to fix this testicular torsion like mid-September. I have the surgery, and I'm supposed to be on bed rest for 6 weeks, which was pretty badass because I didn't like running. I still don't like running. I hate it. It hurts my knees, and and because of the testicular torsion, I'm like super leery of it. I don't want to run, and so they booked me for bed rest. I'm not supposed to basically leave the barracks and whatever. No training, none of that stuff. I could walk to the chow hall. I can whatever, but the problem was deer season was about to start, and I'd never hunted whitetail, and I'd saved up. This was back when on base you could put a hunting rifle on layaway, and I did that the winter prior and purchased my first 30-06 on my own. I wasn't using my just a hand-me-down rifle or anything. I bought my own rifle, put it on layaway, paid on it for like 3 months, and got it out. I had this two-wheel drive Ford Ranger that I was cruising around in that I bought just off base there at one of the rip-off military kind of freaking car dealerships where they like to take advantage of young Marines, And so I think my interest rate was like freaking 24% or something. And so I'm cruising around in this little Ford Ranger, and I ignored my order of bed rest and decided to go deer hunting that first week of October. So I'm like 2 weeks out of the surgery. Not supposed to exactly get my balls wet, right? So I hope none of you are blushing as I'm telling you this story, all right? Let's just clear that up right now. I get out into the woods. So I'd scouted this area throughout the summer, and there weren't a lot of deer in there. And in North Carolina, they run around chasing deer with hounds. It's the damnedest thing. They like install these bass boat like chairs in the back of their truck on like the toolbox or in the bed of the truck, and they sit there on the side of the road. And there'll be like 10 trucks lined up, right? And they'll all release these hounds that'll go off into the woods, and I think the goal is the dogs go out and chase the deer back towards the truck so they could just sit there and shoot them. And I'd never experienced anything like this. It was a whole new thing. And I'd stopped and talked to one of these dudes that were doing that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're not going to get a deer without hounds. These woods are too thick." And that's just a wrong thing to say to a young guy like me, full of piss and vinegar. So I scouted this area. And what I found on the north end via a map is if I parked on this like dead end road and hiked in, it was only like a half a mile, and it's like real brushy, super thick woods, and swampy. There's like swampy areas in here, and there's alligators and stuff. And if I hiked in, it put me kind of on the edge of this private hunting club property called the Paradise Hunting Club or something like that. It was Paradise something hunting club, whatever. And you couldn't trespass on it, right? So I had this idea that if I sat right outside on the edge of this property, they were going to chase a buck off the property and onto the national forest, and I'd shoot it. So I that's what I did. I sat there. I'm like 20 yards from the fence, and it's just this little rickety, 4-foot barbed wire fence with no trespassing signs on it. And no kidding, I can hear dudes over on the hunting property hunting. I can hear them talking and running their dogs and all this stuff that they do in North Carolina. And lo and behold, this little 3x3, which they refer to as 6 points out there, comes bounding over the fence and kind of runs past me a little bit and stops. So I spun around. He's on national forest now. Now it's open game, man. And I let him have it. Also keep in mind I just had this surgery, so getting to this spot was not easy. It was very close steps, short steps, slowly moving through the brush, trying to get to this spot. But I was determined to get out and do some hunting. So the buck, I hit him with that 30-06, and he takes like 4 steps and all of a sudden disappears. And I get up. And what I wanted to do was run over there because I wasn't sure where he went, right? And I wanted to run over there and find out where he went. Well, I like waddle over there because my balls hurt, and get over there, and there's like this swamp. This swamp water is not like the water in the West. It looks like oil. It's super dark and black and like thick, and it's just it looks contaminated. It's not. It's just the nature of the water sitting in that kind of swampy kind of landscape. It's just stained water, and so and it's full of these cottonmouth snakes that are super poisonous. And we used to shoot them all the time when I was in the Marines. So anyway, I get over there and I'm looking around for this deer. There's blood on the ground, and I'm like, where the hell did this deer go? And look in the swamp, and just the only thing I could see is about 2 inches of antler tip hanging out of the swamp. He had thrown himself into the swamp and sunk. You can't see in this water, so I don't know if it's not like they had these big alligators, but there were alligators. I'd see them all the time when I was bass fishing on the rivers and stuff. I bought this little $800 bass boat that ran about half the time, and that's what I would do is I would go and I'd bass fish up and down these rivers, and I'd see alligators all the time, right? And I'd go around the corner and people would be like water skiing on that, and I'd be screaming at them hey, there's an alligator, and they didn't care. They're just used to it. That's how they grew up. So anyway, deer is in the swamp. All I see is this antler tip hanging out. And the only way I can get it, I grabbed this big stick and tried to kind of latch the antler and pull it out of the swamp, because remember, I'm not supposed to get wet. I just had surgery 2 weeks ago in a very sensitive freaking area. And, well, the stick didn't work. So I find myself wading out into this nasty swamp water, uncertain if there were cottonmouth snakes or alligators or whatever critters running around the woods of North Carolina might be in. I know there's leeches in them and all sorts of stuff. So I as fast as I possibly could, supposed to be on bed rest, wade myself out into this nasty swamp water, grab that antler, and pull this buck back up onto shore. And I proceed to gut him out. I like I told you, when walking in there was like a half a mile from the dead end road that I'd parked, and pulling that buck out back to my truck was the longest, most painful, most difficult pack out I have ever, still to this day, experienced. And it's not because of the distance. It's because I just had surgery on my damn balls. Right. So you guys can laugh all you want with that, but it was part of the reality. And that's what I had to deal with. And so I inched this thing back to my truck, had to flag down this dude on a 4-wheeler to come help me get it in my truck because I couldn't lift. I wasn't supposed to lift. I shouldn't have been out there hunting. I mean, let's use that as the lesson of this episode. I should not have been out there hunting, right? I should have been following doctor's orders and been on bed rest. But when you're, 19, 20, 21 years old, you don't give a shit. That's just what we do. And got this little buck in the back of my truck, and started heading out of the national forest, and I was going to take it home and somehow hang it, or back to the barracks, and somehow hang it and skin it out, right? Well, I stopped and talked to one of those dudes that were like sitting in the back of their truck waiting for their hounds to push a deer towards them, and like they wouldn't even talk to me. They wouldn't even acknowledge me. They were blown away that they'd given me all this warning that you cannot get a deer unless you use hounds in this particular part of North Carolina. It was pretty. It was like one of those glorious moments you have as a hunter, right? I'd bucked the odds, and I got my first whitetail ever. He wasn't anything to brag about, nothing to write home about. But when you walk into my studio, the Western Huntsman podcast studio here in Hayden, Idaho, right behind me is that little 3-point buck on the wall, one of those old school mounts with the red cover over the top, and it's kind of falling apart. I need to fix it up, but one of my proudest bucks right there, and it tasted pretty good. It was I made a bunch of jerky and passed it out to Marines and everything after that. It was so that's my first whitetail story. It was just one of those hunts that I'll always remember. I'll never forget about it, and it kind of set up this newfound determination and level of commitment to being successful on my hunts that I've had ever since, because the odds were against me. I didn't know North Carolina. I didn't know how to hunt whitetail. I didn't know the public ground and versus the private. I didn't have hounds. I didn't have everything was against me, and I was determined. Oh, and also I just had surgery. I was determined. Funny story about that surgery too, by the way. So that happened to the left side, right? Testicle. And, like 3 months later, it happened to my right side. And the doctor warned me it might. But once I got off bed rest and went on we were doing our runs and whatever, happened on the right side again. And you know what's funny about the right side versus the left side is it fucking hurt just as much as the left side. So there you go. There's my whitetail story. Hope you enjoyed it. Man, we got deep on that last story. You guys know some personal shit about me now. So, pretty brave putting that out there. All right, now we're going to take it from North Carolina. I'm out of the Marines now, and I'm in Washington, Eastern Washington. I got this tag, and I got to be careful in this one because I don't want to give away. I feel like if I say the wrong thing, I'll give away exact locations, and I don't want to do that. I don't think that's fair to the hunters that are in Eastern Washington, but I just want to say it's a great unit. It's an interesting location. There's a lot of big bucks in it, and this is going to be a mule deer hunt. The reason is I guess why I say it's a great unit. It's an interesting landscape. It's like this transitional landscape. It's going from this mountainous evergreen coniferous type forest area and transitioning to the plains of central Washington, real agricultural, flat, rolling hill kind of area. There's still a lot of evergreen trees, but it's not super thick, and it's like almost a wetlands area. So that ties into the story that I'm going to get into. This is going to be one of those hunts that I left super bitter. I was pretty upset. I was livid. If we're being honest, I was freaking livid over the situation that I'm about to tell you. So let's get into this. I think it was 2004 or 2005. I don't quite remember. But in this particular unit, when you're hunting mule deer, there was this. I should have looked this up to verify what exactly it was. But there was this antler restriction in this unit. And I want to say it was either a 4 or a 5 point. It was bigger than what you see normally on like an antler restriction unit. Usually they'll have a 2 or 3 point or better kind of regulation in a lot of units throughout the West. In this case, it was higher. It was like 4, and I actually want to say it was a 5 point or better kind of restriction, which makes it difficult because even if you've got a great set of optics, sometimes it's difficult to tell whether or not that thing is that thing's a 5 point or not. So anyway, that kind of sets up the stage that made it a little bit more of a challenging hunt, which I liked. So there's this guy, and his name was Mike, and he owned a privately owned campground on this lake, and it wasn't a very big lake, but it was big enough that you could get out there and fish and get on a boat and kind of. I think it was mainly. I don't know if it was motorized boats were allowed on it or not. I can't remember. This was years ago. Lots of gallons of whiskey later. But so he owned this campground, and he also owned a bunch of agricultural acreage, which he actually ran bison on this land outside of where the campground was. So I met this guy and got talking to him, and I made a deal with him that if he let me camp in his campground during deer season, I would help him fix up this building that was next to the campground. He kind of wanted to turn it into like this venue for live music and kind of a dance hall area. And this was I was working construction back then, and I was pretty handy, so I traded him with a bunch of weekends of work on this building. For free camping, because it was kind of an expensive place to camp. It was like, $20 a night, and I didn't have that kind of dough. And so he agreed, and I helped him out and fixed up this building. We got it to a point where he was able to open it for a dance hall and just kind of a cool little spot. Anyway, the lake, he would rent these rowboats on this lake. And so I was camped out there, and at the time I had, for $400, bought the ugliest damn trailer you'd ever see in your life. It was like this 1966, I don't even remember the brand name. Nothing really worked in it. The roof leaked, but it did have a good heater, and it would keep me warm at night. And I would take my dog. I had this border collie at the time, Capone, and me and Capone would go out and camp, and Capone would just kind of hang out at the campground while I was off hunting during the day. So this old trailer, I get up like 4 a.m, and I had arranged it with Mike that I could take a rowboat and paddle to the other end of the lake to this area where there was some public land, pretty good public land, kind of that was sandwiched in between a bunch of private land, so it was difficult to access. Like the story before, I didn't have a smartphone or Onyx because they didn't exist at this point. This was like 2 years before smartphones actually came out, somewhere around there. I'd used maps, and the one thing that I didn't pay attention to, which is an important part for later on in this story, is the state highway, which from the campground was several miles away via dirt road. Well, it kind of turned to the south and rounded towards the other end of the lake and came within about a mile of the lake. I also write about this the story on the westernhuntsman.com, by the way. I just don't remember the name of that article, and so I could just give you a lot more detail here. So anyway, that state highway, I didn't know this, kind of came within about a mile of the lake, and so it was accessible there. So I get up 4 o'clock in the morning, load all my gear into this rowboat, and it's just one of those aluminum rowboats with 2 paddles attached to it, and I start paddling in the moonlight to the other end of this lake. And I'm paddling along. There's fish jumping everywhere, and I was doing my best to not get derailed with fish because I'm famous for this. I'm big into fishing. I love fishing, and one of the things that's happened in the past, like when I'm supposed to be out elk hunting or something, and I see trout going nuts down on the river, I'll stop and bust out the fly rod and go fishing for a while, and it kind of derails my hunt. So I'm trying my damnedest not to do this. And I get to the other end of the lake. It takes about an hour to row across this lake. The sun was still pitch black. It was still too dark. So I didn't want to get off the boat yet. I didn't want to disrupt where I was going to be hunting just quite yet. So I sit out there and actually caught a couple of fish with I think I had like one of those spinny what are they called, little jakes or something like that. And I'm spin fishing and I'm catching these rainbow trout. Finally, I start seeing some light on the horizon. So I paddle the boat over to the shore and hop out and I pulled the boat up on the beach, and there's this big damn rattlesnake on the beach. And so I just kind of left it alone and went around, which was a bad idea because of the way I had to come back. Anyway, yeah, so I start heading up, and I'm working my way through these trees. And it's kind of rolling hill type kind of country with some evergreens scattered here and there, mainly real patchy. And then there were like these dried up, not swamps, but like wetland areas. And so I'm making my way. I knew where some bucks had been. There was this bachelor group of bucks that were kind of hanging on this hill, like I don't know, about a mile away from me. I'm making my way. And I catch sight of this bachelor group of bucks right as the sun's coming up, right? And I think that's what saved me, because the sun was behind me and the glare made it so they couldn't see me. So I dropped down into this dried out river bottom and start making my way closer to these bucks. And got to a point where in my binos I could see these bucks. One of them is a very solid, nice 5-point, plain as day, nice buck. Pretty excited, and I'm gonna. He was super wide too. I was pretty excited about that. But I've started making my way over there, and they were feeding, kind of side hilling on this hill. So I had to stay low and slow, and I'm stalking in. I wanted to get within like 200 yards. I don't know why, other than that's just what I felt like I wanted to do at the time. And, this was back before the 6.5 Creedmoor type kind of stuff was out. And I'm a damn good shot. I'm a Marine. I'm a Marine that was a third award expert rifleman in the Marine Corps. And so I'm a good shot. But I know in certain circumstances, just because of the nature of the terrain, I wanted to get closer. And so I did. I worked my way. And at one point, the bucks, they didn't bust me, but they knew something was awry, right? They were like, okay, I swear I just saw something. I don't know what it was. And so they kind of casually move around this hill. And so I'm like, okay, no big deal. They're not spooked. They're not like shitting into getting out of here, right? I start working my way, still staying in the river bottom. Well, then I get to a point where I needed to get on their level because of the way the terrain was. And up on that hill, I didn't really have a shot from below if I'd have stayed in that river bottom. Because it turned and went kind of the other direction. So I made my way out of the river bottom. I waited till they went around the hill, and I made my way up the hill to get on their level, and I could easily sneak around to get to where these bucks were. There was 4 bucks, and one of them was that nice big 5-point I was telling you about. I get to them. I go. It's like I think I came up on the south end of the hill, and they had worked their way to the west end of the hill, and I kind of made my way just kind of behind them. I get into this great position. The bucks are just feeding casually. They had no idea I was there. Wind was right. Perfect morning. There was no wind, really, other than just the thermals on the hill, and that's why I like to get on their same level. It's another reason for it. So I'm working up to them. I have this great shot opportunity, but I had to wait for that 5-point to take 3 more steps or something, so that there was no chance of me hitting the other bucks that were. There was one of the back end of one of the bucks was kind of blocking him. So I'm sitting there waiting for him to do that, and I'm sighted in. I got my arm wrapped in my sling, ready for a nice clean shot. It was an easy shot, maybe 100 yards, if that, maybe 80 yards to be more accurate. But he does finally take those steps that I needed, and I put those crosshairs on him. And all of a sudden, I hear this truck, screech to a halt. What I didn't know is as I'd followed these bucks up and around the hill, that state highway that I'd mentioned before came up to the bottom of the hill, basically. So like 200 yards below me, I didn't even notice this highway. There's this truck. It's a Dodge. It's like a 1998 Dodge extended cab pickup truck, gray, all beat up. And this truck comes to a stop and it squeaks. All the deer, their heads go up and they're looking down on the highway. And it threw me off of my shot. And all of a sudden I hear and I see a flash from the window of this truck. This dipshit pulls up on the highway, slams on the brake, and this passenger shot this buck from the highway, right out from underneath me. Now, in their defense, I don't know whether or not they knew I was there or not. I have a hard time believing that they didn't know, simply because, Washington is big on wearing orange, and it's not like I was in thick brush or cover or trees or anything. This was a pretty open field. I've hunted pheasants on this hill since. I shot a bunch, so that kind of gives you an idea of the habitat. It's that kind of habitat, upland game birds and the deer moving through, and periodically, it's a strange place for them, but you'll see moose out there as well. Anyway, this guy shoots this buck, and they jump out of the truck. They don't even turn it off and go running up to the buck. And finally, I stood up and started walking towards them, and they noticed me, and I could tell they're getting nervous, right? As I'm getting closer, they're getting super nervous. And I swear they were getting nervous because they knew I had that buck dead to rights. That was my buck. I know it's public land, but what they did was illegal. You don't shoot from the damn highway. And that's what they did. And so when I got up there, I bawled them out. I mean, it was like I was threatening to beat their ass. And I told them to get away from the buck. I told them I'm calling the game warden, and I was gonna. And it's you guys have to understand too. One thing that maybe from that last segment story of the whitetail in North Carolina might help put this into perspective. I was just fresh out of the Marine Corps. Maybe at the most, this was my second hunting season since being out of the Marines. The Marine Corps, for a lot of us that have served in the gun club of the Marine Corps, we get out and we have these super short fuses, right? We have these tempers that are pretty violent and aggressive, and I think that it's because when you transition from the lifestyle of the Marines, we'd just been in Iraq, we'd been all over the world chasing down terrorists, all the stuff that we had done, right? And all of a sudden, we're thrown out into the civilian world where people don't wear they don't understand like a uniform and how your appearance needs to come across as disciplined and professional. All these things the military is, right? They teach you these things and it gets ingrained in your mind. I remember my fuse was short just going to like a buffet restaurant with my family, and people would move so slowly and just mosey through the restaurant, and you have this intensity from the Marines that it takes a long time for this to go away. And that I just wanted to explain that part so you guys don't think, I'm not always like that. It was just the nature, the time frame, the timing of me getting out of the Marine Corps at that point. I had this super short fuse, and I was pissed. I was pissed that they just shot that deer illegally from the state highway from a truck. And I'm like 80 to 90% sure that they knew that I was doing the stock on that buck. And they took the cheap road. They took the cheap way out and blasted that thing right out from underneath me. And I was ready to beat some ass. And I would have too, because again, I was just right out of the Marine Corps. You guys could tell probably in my voice, I'm still mad about it. And it was like 15 years ago, right? And so I'm still mad about it. So they leave. I did. This was I finally had my first cell phone. Obviously not a smartphone yet. And I called this game warden that I knew that lived in the area, and he came out there and got the buck. I tried to talk him into letting me keep the antlers, but I told him the whole story. I did get the license plates, and I want you guys to understand. Like, I don't want anybody to take this like, oh, well, you're a tattletale there, Jim. And kind of have that kind of reaction, because what you have to understand is when people do that, when they break the law, they're fucking the rest of us over. All right, and I know I've had some foul language in this episode, but that's just what happens. They are fucking the rest of us over, because when we're out there and we're following the law and we're doing the right thing, and we just want these hunting seasons. We don't. The more regulations they put on us, the harder it is for us to achieve our objectives and our goals when it comes to being an outdoorsman and a hunter. And so when they do those kind of things, we get added restrictions, added regulations, and it screws the rest of us over. And it's not our fault, but we suffer from it because they make bad decisions. That's why. And I'll tell you another thing. People can call me a tattletale all day long, but if that happened again, I would call the game warden again. And they got turned in, and they did get ticketed for that. I think they lost some hunting privileges for a couple years. So anyway, and it's important, you guys. If you see people out there doing that kind of stuff, it does need to be reported. We have to make sure we're policing ourselves so that we're not getting added regulations and adding fuel to the fire of anti-hunting organizations. And just honestly, that's freaking dangerous. You don't pull up on a state highway. I could kind of see it on a dirt road, different scenario, different situation. But on a state highway, you just pull up and start shooting from the road. That's bullshit. So anyway, that was a story. And the lesson there is make sure you guys, young hunters, adult onset hunters, you're getting out there. Safety is imperative, and following the rules and regulations and knowing the regulations for each state that you're hunting in, whatever, a lot of states, the regulations change unit to unit. And so you just got to keep up with it. I know it's kind of a bitch sometimes, but you got to keep up with it. And so, that was kind of the objective to that story. I wish I look back now. I just, I remember this feeling. I just wanted to start punching these guys, and I was so irritated and mad. And it could have gone bad because we were all armed, right? And so it could have been like the Wild West, OK Corral or something. And nobody wants that kind of stuff to happen. So, and nobody wants their buck shot out from underneath them. Even though I didn't own that buck and I didn't own the land I was hunting on. I had the buck dead to rights, and I'm pretty sure they knew that, and they still suckered me out of that buck. And the cool part about that is it kind of like almost like a blessing in disguise. I got a buck that was even bigger that year in Washington. I ended up the biggest buck I've ever gotten. It's on my wall in my TV room right now, and stud of a buck. There's that story. We got one more story to go, and let's get into it now. Yeah, right on. I'm digging the transition music. Hope you guys like it. All right, so this last story, I call it Dancing with Bears, and I bring it up because it's a cool story, and it was we're gonna go from Washington to all the way forward, probably 7 years. I want to say it's like 2012, 2013, somewhere in there, to Idaho on an elk hunt in the panhandle of Idaho. And it was a dark and stormy night, right? We could start it like that. It kind of was. When I was driving up to this spot that I knew, it's September, I'm bow hunting for elk, and this was back before I got proficient at all with bugles. I was okay. I used a cow call a lot. I think it was like the Primo's cow call. I can't remember. It was some other cow call. I don't use them anymore. But heading up, storming. These elk ran across the road while on the dirt road I was driving up to this spot, and they were super wet. It was all cows, and they go trucking across the road. It's like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, still dark, or getting close to sunup at some point here. So by the time I got to the top, I could see the light was on the horizon. My favorite time of day. One of my biggest motivations for getting out and hunting is that first light. I love it. It's like that spiritual time as a hunter. The forest is waking up. The woods are waking up. Even though those animals are pretty nocturnal, they've been up all night. You just get this feeling and sense that the woods and all the life in the woods is just coming to life for the day. And it's a cool time. It's a great time. The problem in this case was there was this old logging road that I chose to go down. And it went for a long ways. I'd hiked it I'd hiked it several times before, and gotten close to getting an elk up there, but it was super steep, both and it's like it's probably mid slope, and so I'm walking down this old logging road, and it was a super old logging road. It was just basically a single file trail, elk trail, that went down, and I was trying to get to kind of the east slope of this mountain, and this was the only way to really get to it without walking through the thick brush and everything. So it's raining, and it was super windy, and it's barely light. I'd walked a little over a mile down this trail. So when you guys know, we're always cognitive of the wind when we're elk hunting. We're always watching the thermals, paying attention, using our wind checker often, and just kind of paying attention to that. When it's raining and the wind is blowing like it was then, you don't have to worry about being quiet, which when you're elk hunting anyway, I don't worry too much about being quiet. The takeaway with that is because of the wind and the sound from the rain, the animals can't hear you anyway, nor can they smell you as well. And I don't know why that. I don't know what the. I don't want to say that. I don't know if they could smell you as well or not. But it obviously, if I'm walking into the wind, I don't care about what smells me behind me. It's in front of me. So I'm taking this trail. I've got my bow. I don't have an arrow nocked. I have this little. This was a mistake too. I have this little sidearm. At the time, it was one of those little Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 380 pistols, which where I hunt in the panhandle of Idaho, it is grizzly country. So that firearm is worthless. All it's going to do is piss that bear off, right? And I just wasn't really super concerned about it at the time. And I've just never really been concerned about black bears because they're real prevalent here in the panhandle of Idaho. There's black bears everywhere. And so it's just not something that I've ever been super nervous about. I do get nervous with grizzly bears, and I'm super cautious. I know the areas in Idaho where there's more grizzly bears versus there is a small chance of running into a grizzly bear. And luckily, this day I didn't run into a grizzly bear because I think it would have been a lot worse than it was. I'm walking down the trail, wind's in my face. Raining, it's like a driving rain, and I felt like the rain was based on the clouds I'm watching and how they're moving. I felt like it was going to let up and it was going to turn into a nice day. That's kind of what was forecasted, and that's what the clouds were telling me as well. So as I'm moving around this bend in the trail, it kind of widens out, and there's this overgrowth on the road, right? This kind of thick brush, real grassy, like weeds growing in the road. Not a lot of visibility except for what's on the trail. The woods are real dark and thick, both above me and below me. And I did start getting this feeling that I wasn't alone, right? And like, I don't know if you guys have ever felt this before. And I felt it a few times. And one time I busted a mountain lion watching me. That you just kind of get this sense, especially like if you're in the woods, the birds are chirping, the squirrels are being obnoxious, making as much noise as they can, the chipmunks are out there doing their noise, and all of a sudden all that goes dead silent. You're not alone at that point. There's some kind of predator in the area, and it might just be a bobcat or something. But anyway, get around this corner, and I kind of come to a stop because I just felt like I had to stop. And as I stopped, this black bear that was bedded down in that thick brush I was telling you about on the side of the trail, like jumps up. And the wall in front of me in my studio is about 8 feet away from me. And that bear was closer than that. He came out, I smelled him. I smelled him when he stood up. And it was a big black bear. He was a big boy. And he jumps up, kind of stands halfway on his hind legs, right? And he's looking at me, and he just lets off this nasty growl, groany thing, showing his teeth. I've never actually heard a bear do this. And if you just kind of showed me the recorded sound, I would have thought it was like, a pit bull or something. But it was a bear, and it was loud. It scared the hell out of me. I had my bow. I had bear spray on me, too. but it happened so fast, I couldn't get to that little baby Smith & Wesson Bodyguard 380 I had. I couldn't get to my bear spray, and all I did was I was like in shock, and I kind of almost started falling backwards, and I dropped my bow. And as I'm doing that, and the bear's making this crazy groaning loud noise, he starts trucking down the mountain, takes off the other direction. And it was so lucky he didn't come at me, because I would have had no defense. I had no way to react. It was too fast. It happened so fast that if he would have come after me, he could have done some real damage in a short amount of time. And I think what happened is he's bedded down in this brush, right? And I'm coming from down the trail. The wind's in my face. He can't smell me. He can't hear me because of the rain. The driving rain's making all this noise, hitting the trees and the leaves and everything else that's going on in the woods with this storm going on. And so I scared him every bit as much as he scared me. And we both scared the shit out of each other. And that's what happened. And that bear took off trucking down that mountain. And I heard him running. I heard him running for it seemed like 30 seconds, which is a long time considering how fast he was moving, going down. And he's knocking over these branches and running through the deadfall. And it's old growth timber type forest. And he's just going trucking through these woods, and I can hear him as he's running, he's making these crazy groans, like who are you? What are you doing here? Kind of thing, and just kind of groaning about the whole situation, and it scared the crap out of me. And so I actually turned around and went to a different hunting spot. I hate to admit it, because I'm not a sissy when it comes to bears and stuff in the woods, but kind of I am, right? I mean, he scared the life out of me, and I drove to the other end of that unit. And went and hunted on that side of it for a while. Ironically, when I got back to my truck, there was this other truck pulling up. It was also fall bear season, and they were loading out, getting ready to go bear hunting. And so I told them what happened. I told him, man, I don't think he's going to stick around because he took off like a freaking freight train down that mountain. So I don't think you're going to find him. But here's what happened. There's a bear. There you go. Go find him, man. Get him, because I want some payback for him taking like 10 years off of my life. The lesson or the takeaway I think that you guys should take out of this is when we're hunting and we're in predator country, like especially grizzly bear country, right? You know, and another thing that makes me nervous, like mountain lions make me nervous. And if I could see them and I know they're there, I'm good. They don't make me nervous at all. But they're so damn sneaky and quiet. They make me nervous. And so mountain lions and grizzly bears are my two nemesis in the woods. And so I'm always super aware when I'm in those situations, and I want to make sure that, you know, my head's on a swivel and I'm keeping an eye out, front, back, sides, everything. But when we're hunting and you're in these areas where you know these predators live, the thing to keep in mind is, you know, a lot of times we're trying to be super quiet. We're watching our wind. Sometimes I know a lot of hunters that go out and use a lot of these descending products. Not sure how well they work, but maybe they are effective, so you might not alert these predators, and that's the problem that you'll run into almost every time when in regards to like a bear attack. Almost every time it's because you surprise them and they don't know you're there, and all of a sudden you're on top of them, especially a sow with cubs. You know, it's just that's where these problems kind of come up. So there's not a lot you could do about it when especially if you're deer hunting and you are trying to be super quiet. You're not using bugles. You're not, you know, you're just kind of slipping through the forest as quietly as you can, trying to get to a location, or maybe you're stalking in on something. These are the times when you just have to be 100% with your A game, safety-wise, with these predators, because that's a perfect example of what happens. I know, like my father-in-law, he was walking down a trail one time and was stepped on a log that was falling over this trail, and it was like mossy. It had some moss growing on it, and he slipped and fell, and it was raining, and because of the rain, he didn't know that as he's heading south on this little game trail, there was a big bear heading north on that same game trail, and they were about to come face to face. But because he slipped and fell off that log, made all this noise, all of a sudden this bear is alerted and turns around and runs the opposite direction. So that's kind of stuff that'll happen a lot. And I'm talking specifically regarding hunting in the woods while it's actively storming and raining. Raining really dampens your sound, and I am a believer that it has a huge impact on the smell and the way that human scent will travel, or any scent for that matter. But so there you go. There's a nice little bear story for you, for you to take to bed tonight, and hopefully don't give you nightmares or anything, right? So anyway. So that's going to wrap up this episode, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. It was kind of fun doing this. I like sharing stories. You know, as hunters, we always like to talk about, share stories and talk about our hunts and some of the experiences. These were just some that I kind of picked out that I thought, I think people would be interested in hearing, because they have this interesting aspect to them, and they also have kind of a lesson in there that you can learn and just help you guys improve, not just in terms of being a hunter, because that's not what these stories were about. I didn't really teach any hunting strategy or anything in these. It was just more of you take a lesson about, okay, if it's storming, I know to be a little bit more aware, be a little bit more cautious moving through the sticks as we're hunting. The other story, I don't know what the key takeaway with that douchebag that shot the deer out from the state highway, but just don't do that kind of crap, man. And we talked about the first whitetail. Don't go hunting after you had surgery on your balls, and the doe buck story where I shot that doe that was standing in front of the buck. So hopefully you guys enjoyed them. Let me know what you think at jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. That's my email address. And then before I wrap it up, I just want to remind everybody to send. I don't think I mentioned this in the intro, actually. The part of those T-shirts that I was talking about, where you guys are going to submit your T-shirt ideas to me, and when we select some T-shirts and have them made, they're going to be for sale at thewesternhuntsman.com. And every time a T-shirt sells, $5 of that is going to the Foundation for Wildlife Management. I don't think I mentioned that part. So the point with those T-shirts is to raise money for the Foundation for Wildlife Management, so that they have the ways and means to reimburse the guys that are out there hunting and trapping successfully these wolves, and trying to get them back down. Because there was a new report that came out that stated, and I've seen a couple of different reports, but Idaho Fish and Game they did this study during 2019 and have come to the conclusion that there are definitely confirmed over 1,000 wolves. One of the reports said they can confirm over 1,500 wolves in the state of Idaho. And keep in mind, the Idaho landscape can only handle up to 500 wolves. So that is way out of check and balance right there. And so just keep that in mind as we're going forward. So write up. Give me your T-shirt ideas. It's all in regards to wolves. That's let's keep them in regards to wolves. You gotta, I like to see the funny ones and stuff like that. And if you guys can do it without, I have to be careful with what sayings we choose. They have to be, people are going to be wearing these T-shirts. So I'm going to love seeing some of the ones that won't be printable, because they'll be hilarious as all get out. And I love that kind of stuff. But, try to come up with something creative that people will be fine wearing out in public, and maybe striking some thought into some pro-wolf type kind of folks out there, or, thought-provoking, funny, factual, or just any kind of saying. And don't make it like a big long paragraph. Try to keep it down to like 2 sentences, or less. Less would be better. 5 words would be really good. That we could put on these T-shirts and sell them and raise money for the Foundation for Wildlife Management to help get these wolves under control. I think it's a good cause. If you guys have ever done T-shirts, and sold T-shirts at anything, they're not super profitable. So that $5 is basically going to be what is the money left after the T-shirt is made and printed and shipped and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to take that money and take $5 of the actual profitable revenue of that and send it right to Justin Webb over at the Foundation for Wildlife Management. So I encourage you to do that. Jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. Jim@thewesternhuntsman.com. Send me an email. put in the subject line wolf t-shirt or something like that, so I know what that's going to be. Send me your sayings. I'm going to select the winner's going to receive a free t-shirt with their saying on it, and then as those t-shirts sell, I'll be writing checks to the Foundation for Wildlife Management to help raise money to get the wolves under control. Okay, you guys know I repeated that stuff multiple times, so I think we got this nailed down. I appreciate you guys tuning in. That was a fun episode for me. Next week, I've actually got 2 guys lined up next week that I'm going to record. I don't know if I'm going to release them both, but I've got 2 guys lined up for an interview next week. They're both freaking badasses, and I'm super excited to talk to them. And it's going to be a good time, so don't miss it. Thanks again, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.